Okay, here's a short video screencast on what we believe are some best practices to use when you're precepting paramedic students from our program. And the first and most obvious comment is thank you so very much for your time and your efforts in helping these paramedic students develop. They cannot get the same kind of education without your efforts, and we really understand and appreciate the commitment and the contribution that preceptors make to our program. Little quick background about our program. It's about a year-long didactic classroom sessions. We do a lot of lab and a lot of simulated cases. We're not a lecture format. We're a flipped classroom, and we do a full-on lab and sim almost all the time. And then there's an additional online independent piece of that, and that is significant. And the total comes out to about 600 hours for their didactic. Then they move to a clinical phase, and actually they can start that clinical phase about halfway through the didactic. So we usually start in July with the didactic, and that means that they're starting to come into the ER clinical phase in late January. Once they're done with that clinical phase in the hospital, which is almost all ER, then they move on to the field internship. The field internship is supposed to be a capstone experience. It's supposed to be the last thing they do. It's the thing that they do after they've had all the preparation from lab and sim. They've had some time to do some skills and interact with some patients and work some cases in the ER. But when they come to the field internship, that is supposed to be the capstone thing. The ER clinical sessions, 250 hours of that, those are usually 12-hour shifts, so they're going to have been in the ER for a significant amount of time. And we need them to complete that before they start that field internship in order that the field internship truly be a capstone. Field internship's got 3 phases, and I'll explain those briefly. Some students will actually function in each of those 3 phases, and then some students are already working for the service where they do clinicals, and they are able to buzz through that observer phase pretty quick. But the observer phase is to get them oriented to that specific field environment. They will have been in our simulated field environment, but where things are in your trucks, where things are and how you do business, and what it is like to be a member of that service. And so that's the observation time. After that, they move into a phase where they're the partner for the team leader. So they're really the preceptor's partner. And then finally they move into where they're trying to do team leads themselves. They need 50 successful team leads, not just 50 experienced team leads. And this total field internship is at least 250 hours. We find in our system it's running closer to 350 than it is 250. It's all based on what sort of volume and what the distribution of that volume is, as well as how soon they are successful in their experience. So again, the observer phase, that student can do ALS skills. They're not just sitting there watching, they're engaging. But remember, they've just come from the ER. So they're basically taking skills that they've practiced in the ER, and now they're going to practice them in the field environment while they kind of get used to what goes on with your service. Who goes where, who says what, and basically just the culture and the feel of how your service works. That student's not even close to ready to function as the partner or the team leader. They just need to figure out how things go. Now again, if the person already works for you as an EMT or in a service very similar to yours, then they can move quickly through or totally be exempted from that phase. There's not a minimum number of hours there. It's a conversation between the clinical coordinator and the student, and probably a preceptor to see if they're ready to move on. When they do move on, it goes to the partner phase. During that phase, again, they can do ALS skills. They're the ALS partner of the team leader. They're not making team leader decisions, but they're functioning as the partner. So what we really need to give that student that best experience is for the real partner, the one that's on the clock, the one that's staffed as the partner to the team leader, to pretty much step back. So it becomes a pretty easy shift for that person if they can step back. But remember, we're trying to teach these students to be good partners, and so if the real partner keeps jumping in, then the student doesn't progress as quickly as maybe we'd like. This also varies in length depending on the student's past experience. I suppose it's possible that a person could exempt from observer and work through partner phase pretty quick, maybe in a shift, if that person's been working for the service, is trusted by the preceptor, Suppose that's okay, but we'd like to see the students spend a little bit of time in that partner role, but it varies depending on the student's experience. But the team leader is what it's all about. That's what the field internship's for. The student actually functions as the team leader. The preceptor steps back now, so the partner re-engages, but the preceptor has stepped back. And that partner may be BLS, ALS, doesn't matter. Either way, the student's function as the team leader. And this team lead experience must be successful. It probably won't be perfect. It probably won't be exactly like the preceptor would do it, but it needs to be successful. And those successful team leads are that student's goal, and they're going to be very interested in getting those. They're going to have every incentive to get that, and you may feel a little bit of pressure to say, yeah, that was successful, but not every attempt is going to be a success. So how do you tell? What makes a successful team lead? Well, this concept of prompts is one that's used by many programs, ours included. And so you prompt a student when you feel compelled to say something. And you want to give them a chance, give them a little bit of rope, let them develop a style, let them think for themselves, but you've got to maintain a good experience for your patient. Patient safety, patient experience, customer service, the whole bit, and that's still your responsibility as the preceptor, and you're simply allowing that student the opportunity to do it to your standard, but there's no guarantee. You may have to prompt them a lot. It may get to a point where you have to take over. We certainly hope that's not the case, but if it is, then do it. You've got to maintain that experience for your patient, and it's your patient still. The preceptor discretion and judgment, it's a very subjective sort of thing, and how you prompt is up to you. It would seem reasonable that perhaps if you're in the back of the ambulance, for instance, the student who's being the team leader would be positioned on the bench seat probably. Perhaps the preceptor could then be in the airway seat, the seat that's behind the patient, where the patient's not seeing all any prompts that might be given while you're still on scene. Obviously you do what you have to do, but we don't want the patient to get the feeling that that this is some sort of disorganized experience they're getting, and that you're in control, you're there, but the student can get some help when they need to. Ideally, the student will look up to you or in some way prompt you for a prompt, but sometimes you have to give that prompt yourself. Discrete prompting, again, is a key. You can work out whatever signals you want. We don't have a set of signals that we want everybody to use, but the idea would be that that would be pretty well discrete. I think if you tap your watch, that indicates, check your time or let's hurry up, or if you give others some other kind of simple signal, put a hand over your face like it's a mask to remind them, oh, hey, there should be a non-breather mask on this patient. I think you'll figure out signals and things that make sense as long as you can be clear and your student's getting it. If they're not, then maybe you can escalate to a verbal prompt and see if that will work. We avoided being real prescriptive about this because we figured that medics work out things that work. But we want you to be absolutely confident that you can and should prompt these students and not let them stray off too far. So what makes a successful team lead? Well, it depends on how many prompts. Obviously, if you went through and there were 4 or 5 prompts, then that's just not successful. I'm not saying that it has to be perfect to where there's no prompts. I think that's a little unrealistic. But it's a very subjective, very judgment call. And the situation for a successful team lead would mean that if you had to prompt the student, the thing you were prompting about was really a relatively minor point. If the student is completely missing the field diagnosis and headed down a wrong road, then that's not a successful team lead. Remember, they should know the medicine. They should know the cases. They're learning to apply the medicine in the actual field environment. They've been through multiple simulations of various types of calls. They're not coming to you cold without any kind of experience, and they're certainly not coming to you without some knowledge and information. Now, the subtleties of the field are so numerous that's why this field internship is such a valuable experience. But you shouldn't have to be teaching them how to treat CHF, but the prompt they might need might be, kind of a judgment call situation or which way to go. Then after the call's over, that's when the coaching happens. That's when this is really, really valuable time. And we realize you're busy, multiple calls, you got things going on and this and that, but I think that's probably as valuable or more than the prompt that will be delivered during the patient care event, the coaching thing that goes on afterwards. It's very valuable, very important, and we really need to know if these students are not receptive, because that's a clear indication that they're not going to excel in the field environment. This is a career technical training program, and we are training people to function in this workplace. If you have them in your workplace and they appear to know it all and aren't going to be coachable, then that's one of the biggest things that hiring managers need to know, and we need to know to correct that or shut that down. So I want to talk briefly about FISDAP. I know this is getting to the point where you've just about heard all you want to hear from me, but I want to run through FISDAP for you real quick. FISDAP is software. It stood for, originally acronym was for Field Internship Student Data Acquisition Project. So this software came about as part of a grant and a project to study field internships on paramedic students and try to make them better. And so the data that is being acquired is being tracked through FISDAP, and there's a great deal of research that goes on, and some improvements have been made. So that's why we use what we use, and it's used by many, many programs across the country. It's an excellent, excellent software package. They document their skills and experiences in the lab and simulation settings, in the clinical setting, and also in the field internship. They will do an evaluation themselves and then ask you to do one as well. And that's an excellent time for you to get together and compare what you think. We need you to be honest. We need you to be direct. You can be kind. You can be nice. But ultimately, the most kind thing to do, the nicest thing to do for these students is to give them honest feedback. They're not necessarily at your service to make new friends and learn where to get free sodas. They're looking to learn how to be paramedics, and the best thing for them is for you to be direct and honest. They'll ask you to sign your evaluation. You can do that with your finger on their laptop or tablet, or we can get you a login and password if you'd like to add another login and password to your life. Excuse me. Here's the first screen they see, and so they document some very basic stuff, including a preceptor's name and how they went to the call. Then they document a patient assessment, and they need to pick from a list of complaints as well as primary and secondary impressions. We have criteria for them, benchmarks for them to meet in terms of those various complaints, as well as a primary, secondary, as well as the age and gender. So they have to get a certain number of short of breath in a pediatric patient, and it's got to be in a certain age group. And so they're very attuned to that list of needs, and they're very interested in getting those kind of patient contacts. Here's where they document all of their straight skills that they did, and then as they get ready to write their narrative note, the FISDAP software seeds their narrative note with a bunch of information, what they did and some things like that, and that's just to help them with writing their note. And then we have prompts in there for them. We want them to write their narrative note the same way every time, so they're going to write a note. You obviously have to do your own documentation of this call in your own system. Students are not writing documentation for the real paramedic, for the preceptor. But in our system, we want them to write it this way. We want them to start every time like this, and so they will fill in some of those. And then here's the evaluation. Here's a sample evaluation where the student thought he was a rock star, and the preceptor said, yeah, but there was a communication thing. And so by marking that as a 1 instead of a 2, then it really gives you kind of the seed for a conversation with that student where you talk about this and that. Nobody expects perfect performance. It's a little bit artificial to see a person come through, a student come through and have 50 team leads and they're all perfect scores. That just doesn't seem really valid. So don't be afraid to mark folks down. It will still be successful if it's not all twos. It's not the end of the world. You get a score down there. You can type in some plan of action stuff, and then that's where you sign. And again, we can get you your own login and password if you would like. There's some FISDAP Preceptor education. It's like a 3 or 4 hour program if you want to go that route, and that's free. Everything we have is free because you're helping us out for free. And then, or you can click on that signature button and sign it with your finger. So, in conclusion, our methodology in the lab and simulation is coach good reps. Prompt those students right before they make a mistake and stray off the mark, or immediately after. If you can't read their mind, sometimes you have to wait for them to step over the line. But don't let them practice something wrong because they learn it, and they learn the wrong things. So stop them, coach them. That's what they're used to in class and simulation settings with us. So continue that. Feel welcome to stop them before they go off the mark. Sometimes I can't tell if a student is going off the mark, and so I just stop them anyway, and I say, stop, what's your plan, what are we doing? And if they're right on, then I say, sorry I stopped you, and we move on. That's not a prompt. That's me trying to clarify if they need a prompt or need redirection. Again, don't be pressured to mark success. You're helping them by giving them honest feedback. And lastly, as same as the first thing, thank you so very much for what you do. And if you need anything from us, if you have questions, comments, concerns, or anything that you need that we can help you with, here's my contact info. Please get a hold of me, and thank you for listening.